What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So since The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom release, there have been quite a few discoveries made. Some of those have been very useful, and now Nintendo has released a patch that has corrected some of those discoveries, which certainly has led to quite a bit of controversy online, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a ridiculous rumor around Sony and a potential acquisition target that really gained a lot more traction online than I was expecting. And we'll also be talking about a report outlining some future plans for both Sony and Nintendo that will seem very obvious. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel. And we're going to start today with Metal Gear Solid Delta. That, of course, being the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake that most people took away from that showcase as the best or the biggest announcement from it. A lot of rumors, of course, and build up for the eventual reveal of this game. But there have been questions around who's developing this. Well, we can see posted up over on Twitter. This from Ethan at Kotaku says, asked who the Snake Eater remake development team is. A spokesperson says it's a combination of Virtuos and Konami's development team. So according to them, Virtuos is doing a lot of support when it comes to the art and assets, those sorts of things. And Konami's internal team is working to remake Metal Gear Solid 3. And there have been some concerns around this. We have had some actual stills or screenshots in-game released, and you can see a couple of those here. I mean, visually speaking, it looks good. Obviously, it's going to look a lot better than what we had on the PlayStation 2 or even the HD releases that we had on the 360 and the PS3. So I'm looking at this as I'm cautiously optimistic in the sense that Konami hasn't exactly developed good Metal Gear Solid games since Kojima departed, obviously with Metal Gear Survive, but I'm optimistic because they're working off of a game that already exists, and most of it comes down to them remaking it, and as they say, try to keep it as true to the original as possible. So still really excited to see more about this game, but when's that going to be? Well, something tells me this could end up in late 2024, potentially 2025. Also, we did get a bit more information seemingly around this Project Q handheld from Sony, which certainly left the internet scratching their head. Not necessarily just the concept, but also the look of the thing. Well, now we're hearing about its battery life, and this might leave you scratching your head once again. We can see this posted up over on Insider Gaming from Tom Henderson, who says, Insider Gaming understands that the Project Q battery life will be around 3 to 4 hours. Okay, so that matches up with what we have with the DualSense lasts longer than that. I know the running joke or the meme is it lasts like 2 or 3 hours. The DualSense controller, technically, people have been able to benchmark it. It's like 6 to 8 hours or something like that. This then being about half of that, which, yeah, it sounds like they attached a screen to the DualSense then. In this case, an 8-inch screen. And this is going to be a weird one if it ends up being correct, because Tom Henderson, of course, had knowledge of this well before its announcement, and they mentioned it was in testing, and that could be prototype builds of the final product that are just prototypes, and it's potential the final product could have a better battery life. But I honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if it's 3 to 4 hours, just because of the DualSense controller itself not having a great battery. So I'm looking around at the competitors. G-Cloud comes to mind at first, right, from Logitech. That gets over 10 hours of battery life, and while it doesn't have the features of the DualSense, some people might say, you know what, it's worth having that extra battery and not having adaptive triggers. I guess the last big thing, though, will be that pricing, and again, I think there's gonna be some sticker shock there. Oh, and we did get a bit of a surprising announcement, technically, for Xbox owners. You can see this posted up over on Twitter from the Dragon Quest account, saying, Infinity Strash, Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai. It's coming September 28th, 2023. We have had this announced and talked about before, but PS5, PS4, Switch, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. Previously, I believe the Xbox was not mentioned, so it's kind of been added to the list of supported platforms here for the game, which is an action RPG. Seems like Dragon Quest fans are getting a kick out of it there in the comments and responses, and it looks pretty cool. I'll be checking that one out in September, provided it doesn't get too crowded in that month, and then, of course, the run-up into October and November. But it's good news, again, for Xbox owners who have been concerned that Square Enix is kind of leaving that platform behind. It appears at least a Dragon Quest game got an update to be added to the Xbox. So good stuff there. Look out for that one at the end of September. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom that's taken up basically all of my free time, but it's a really good game and I'm just about done. I'm on like the last mission or the last thing you have to do. And I've kind of just been exploring then, working out some of the tiers and different parts of the story just for the full understanding as I work to complete the game. But we have been getting updates for this this title, and there have been a few things that were discovered in the game, like duplication glitches seems to be the biggest one that heavily cuts down on farming certain items that otherwise you sort of have to hang out and wait around for. But Nintendo, of course, got wise to this, as you would expect. They've been kind of taking in people's experiences, keeping an eye on things, and they've been noticing some of these duplication glitches because this was released. That's the update version 1.12. It was on May 25th, so right at the end of last week this came out, and they fixed a couple things like an audio bug fix where the sound would play at an extremely high volume in certain conditions, and then they had one for camera work in the depths, which was basically a main quest that seemed to break and you wouldn't be able to progress beyond that. I didn't run into either of those issues, the audio or the quest breaking. However, the other one's a bit more vague, saying several issues have been addressed to improve the gameplay experience. One of those issues is the duplication glitch that a lot of people have been taking advantage of because it's incredibly easy. You jump so you at least have some sort of height off the ground, which is seriously like 3 or 4 feet, and then you pause the game, go in your inventory, hold a certain number of items. These are just mostly consumables or like stones or materials, and then you hit Y and B to exit. It'll drop all of those items you're holding, but it won't drop the ones out of your inventory, so you'll essentially double those up over and over and over again and have hundreds of diamonds, for example, that you can sell for a ton of rupees, or you can do this to clone more of the rare materials that you can use for fusing weapons or upgrading armor. But with the new update, that's basically been eliminated, although it seems that when Nintendo patches one of these duplication glitches out, another one pops up, and indeed that's already been happening on version 1.12, where it's more work, but it's still possible. And that just tells me we're going to see version 1.13 pop up in a week or two, where then that duplication glitch won't be possible, and then another one will be found. The big thing that was coming up and people were annoyed about is, well, you know, it is a single player game. It's not a competitive multiplayer title. This is just something people are using to, in their mind, you know, make their experience better because it fast tracks certain things, or in some cases just makes the game genuinely more fun. And then on the other side, of course, people are saying it ruins the experience. It's not the way that they had intended you to play the game, and it's just going to cheat yourself out of the experience, essentially. But again, it's all a single player experience. If you were online doing this, yeah, that'd be a problem, especially if it's a competitive game, because you're just duplicating stuff and give you an unfair advantage. But it's just sort of the way you want to experience the game. Now, if you just don't update your game, essentially, I guess leave it in suspend mode and just keep playing through it, you won't have the update hit, or you can turn off auto update, I guess. But yeah, for people who didn't realize that they had to close down and auto updated, you're kind of left out in the cold when it comes to this really easy duplication method. And really the way I see it is, it's a single player game. You enjoy the game you want, how you want, but you also have to understand that Nintendo probably will work to patch out some of these bugs and glitches because it's not the way that they intended the game to be played and set it up in the first place. Although, I will say some people are going around beating down others over using the duplication glitch, but I feel like all of us, if you're old enough to remember back in the day, probably surfed up and down that shore looking for a missing number. I need to see the people out there who just grinded all of their Pokemon to level 100 without maybe duplicating that rare candy a couple of times. But anyway, as I mentioned, there are still duplication glitches that are being found seemingly every single day, so seems like Nintendo will be patching this game quite often over the coming months as more are discovered. So if you're looking to still duplicate stuff, do a couple searches on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find a couple of them. Next up, let's talk about a ridiculous rumor around Sony that really gained a lot of traction online yesterday, more than I'd be expecting for where the source ended up being, and sometimes that can happen, right? Some sort of claim can get thrown around so much that you just lose track of the source itself. But for example, you can see this posted up over on Twitter from Peter, who said, rumor Sony is about to acquire CD Projekt Red. That can make the next Witcher game PlayStation exclusive. So they then linked to the source, which was over on Icon Era. And this then links to Gaming Leaks and Rumors that mentions that a Destiny leaker, Liz, hints at PlayStation info, where they simply said PlayStation plans on buying CD Projekt Red, and Days Gone 2 is in development. Okay, and all right, so Liz being a Destiny leaker would have, I guess, info because now Bungie is attached to Sony after they were purchased by them. I will say Bungie seems to be calling the shots almost with a lot of these live service games, but PlayStation buying CD Projekt Red, that would be an interesting one. People have already pointed this out. It's part of the publicly traded company, right? There's CD Projekt and there's CD Projekt Red and all this stuff. So the reason I have a hard time believing a lot of these acquisition rumors is because there are people who would get into significant trouble, like serious trouble, if this was all happening and they just happen to leak it out online. It's not like, oh, you get blacklisted by a platform holder or something. No. Lawsuits will start getting thrown around because, again, publicly traded companies, investors, legitimate money, all this stuff being involved. The other part is I'm not really sure why PlayStation would look to acquire CD Projekt Red. I guess it would kind of fill in a gap that they're sort of missing right now when it comes to the more quote-unquote Western style RPGs. That's the only thing I can think of there. Otherwise, though, all those games just go to Sony's platform anyway. Bungie was a strategic acquisition, as we were seeing they're being used internally to kind of really assess these live service games. I don't really think CD Projekt would do any of that, and it would actually cost a significant amount of money for Sony to acquire them. The other one, Days Gone 2 being in development, yeah, that's doesn't seem to be a thing. I mean, Sony and Bend Studio told us that it's a new intellectual property that they're developing right now, or they started on after apparently the Days Gone 2 pitch was denied, and we learned that from the original director at Bend. And we did have the community manager at Bend Studio kind of posting up a laughing GIF over on Twitter. So yeah, I don't think either of these are correct at all. It just seems to kind of been thrown out on a Discord, which then got clipped, put on Reddit, and then it got linked to Icon Era, which then got posted up on Twitter. Again, that's kind of the grapevine situation there that ended up blowing up on social media. And here we are, apparently Sony buying CD Projekt Red. Well, not really. Next up, let's talk about a report around Nintendo and Sony, specifically their future plans for, I guess, the second half of this year and presentations that they could have lined up. This was posted over on Twitter from Ethan, again over on Kotaku, saying, sources are telling me both PlayStation and Nintendo will have additional showcases this year. Keep your eyes tuned to this channel and watch the space for more developments in the coming weeks and months. I also noticed that Colin Moriarty from Sacred Symbols mentioned that that PlayStation was also seemingly prepping a second showcase. At least he had heard from different people that they were planning to have one before year's end. And Sony is the one that's kind of like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Nintendo should be obvious to everyone. It'd be strange if Nintendo did not have some sort of direct by the end of this year. And in fact, I think the more surprising thing to say would be, oh, there's no direct in June, because a lot of people are expecting it right now. But I wouldn't be shocked if there wasn't a direct in June. They did a couple of Twitter drops, as we said before, and they pushed towards the fall, whether that's September or October, for a larger direct that would work to set up 2024 for the most part. Because if you think about it with Nintendo, right now, they're in kind of this weird in-between period. They had just released Tears of the Kingdom, which, as many people have pointed out, and I think correctly, was the swan song for the Switch. Pikmin 4 coming up, sure, but Pikmin 4 is not going to sell 10 million copies in 3 days. I think we can all agree on that one. And then after that, Metroid Prime 4 would be coming up. So it's kind of a strange time for them to have a direct, or at least a larger general direct, as would line up normally with E3, because they were already going to bypass it anyway. So I think Nintendo will probably hold out until the fall and then start talking about 2024, which may include talks about their next system, or at least games that could be on their next system. A lot of speculation around that one. But for Sony, I kind of think a second showcase is almost needed at this point, unless they're going to communicate solely through their blog. I mean, look at it this way. They have Spider-Man 2 coming up, and while we've seen CG trailers for example, Haven's game or from Firewalk's game, that's kind of it. You feel like they'd have a bit more focus as well on the single player side, and after Spider-Man 2, there's really nothing. So yeah, showcase, I would say for PlayStation, maybe September, October even, would make a lot of sense. But yeah, breaking news. Could see more presentations from Nintendo and Sony before December 31st, 2023. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a situation that's really been unfolding over the weekend, and that has to do with Nintendo, Valve, and the Dolphin emulator. Now, according to reports early on in the weekend, what happened was Nintendo issued a DMCA takedown notice for Dolphin, which was going to Steam. There were plans for it. It was announced at the end of March, and now it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon. However, as we've gone through the weekend, the story's changed a bit. For example, we can see what they're posting now reads. This says Dolphin on Steam indefinitely postponed. They say we were notified by Valve that Nintendo has issued a cease and desist citing the DMCA. It's very important, by the way, not necessarily, hey, we're issuing this DMCA takedown, we've started the process. Cease and desist that cites the DMCA. This is against Dolphin's Steam page, and they've removed Dolphin from Steam until the matter is settled. To go a bit further, Pierre did post up this on Mastodon, which has a new one there, who was apparently involved with the Dolphin project. They said they were the treasurer for the foundation backing the project for a while, technically still is for a month, but they went through kind of the play-by-play here with Valve legal contacting Nintendo America asking, what do you think about Dolphin? Nintendo replied to Valve, well, you think it's bad, and also take it down and get rid of it. And then Valve legal takes it down and forwards NOA's reply to the Dolphin Foundation. Now, it is interesting that Valve seemed to go to Nintendo over Dolphin, but not over things like RetroArch. Is that, I mean, sure, that's using Dolphin cores, I believe, but it's still the same end for that, which is you're playing GameCube games and Wii games off of Steam, technically. But I guess Dolphin was enough publicity and push behind it online that it's like, well, hold on, let's double check with Nintendo about this whole thing and how they feel. And obviously Nintendo is gonna be like, well, yeah, go ahead and take down. The part that's the most interesting though is in the messaging from Nintendo and Valve, they do mention those Wii common keys being in the source code. And I mean, MVG did a very good video, Modern Vintage Gamer, going over this, and yeah, they were in there. He had to blur them out, but I assume the Dolphin team has to address that, remove them in some way, and then it should be fine to go to Steam, but who knows? That might be an indefinite roadblock at this point if Valve and Nintendo are talking. So I'm not sure if much else will come of this. It might just end right here, but who knows? As I mentioned before, Nintendo means business in that courtroom, and they have no problem getting petty and following it to its absolute conclusion. So we'll see if we hear anything more on that end, but something tells me the idea of Dolphin going to Steam, that one might be over. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask if a single player game has a glitch that makes things like farming easier, duplication bugs, etc. Do you use the exploit or ignore it? Look at this, 52% say, yeah, I use it, it's part of the game. 48% say, I don't use it. I would rather play the game as intended. I feel like back in the day, we used to just throw around cheat codes like it was no big deal. I guess it also depends on the cheat code, like the blood code in Mortal Kombat. That made the game better, right? It did. But I guess if you have cheats where you're invincible, infinite ammo, God mode, whatever, it can kind of make the game a bit boring after that initial half hour to an hour of just destroying everything, right? But in this case, to me with Tears of the Kingdom, it was just duplication glitches. You still had to go fight the bosses and do all these other challenges and shrines and stuff. So it wasn't necessarily game breaking in that regard. It just kind of sped things up for people that maybe didn't have a ton of time. But to me, again, it's a single player game. It's a big sandbox. Kind of do what you want. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Corey, who says, in regards to Project Q pricing, I feel it's going to come in at least $300, and I'm basing this off the VR2 pricing. It won't be a big seller for Sony, and they know that. So I talked about some of the pricing on the podcast this weekend. I don't think you're that far off. I wouldn't be shocked if Project Q's price was $250 to $300, and that is going to put off a lot of people. The reason I say that, though, is I kind of feel like Sony is approaching this release as an accessory, not a system. A system, they can say, you know what, it makes sense for us to lose money on this. We're going to make money on the software. what's the motivation to lose money on Project Q? So I think they'd rather have a decent sized margin on it, similar to the PlayStation VR 2, you could say. And that headset ended up being more than the system itself. So Project Q, $250 to $300, wouldn't shock me. I mean, look, the Logitech G Cloud, they want to make money on that. Guess what that launched at? $350. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's the Zelda duplication glitch. Let me know your thoughts on the idea of using something like that in a single player game, and if you were using that in Tears of the Kingdom. Then also, what about the potential for Sony buying CD Projekt Red? Does it make sense, and do you think it'll happen? And then more showcases coming from Sony and Nintendo. When do you think they could be happening? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.